this space. I'm going to talk about how something that's been discussed many times, I guess, in the last 30, 40 years by other authors, which is how we can achieve planning and specifically using computational power. I want to make a note. This is not a discussion of what we need to produce, but how we can achieve certain levels of precision when we are forecasting or trying to identify what we want, how much we want to produce in a society. So, for some context, this work was part of my bachelor thesis almost a decade ago. I had no chance to share it because I started moving towards other types of research. However, I feel that I wanted to come back to this topic. So with a small disclosure, this is 9 years old. Things have changed since then, technology has changed, and also neural networks are way more popular today than they were a decade ago. So I started working this topic back in 2014, I guess, more than 10 years ago, and I finished my dissertation probably a couple years after. So let me, for some context, I teach statistics at the Faculty of Economics at the National University of Mexico, and I did my master's degree at this university and in Cambridge, Massachusetts, at the Harvard University. So, cool. So I'm going to share more of what was my bachelor dissertation at that time. The idea was to demonstrate both empirically and theoretically that economic computational planning is more efficient than capitalist decision making when making products. I'm going to talk about a specific case where I applied these things back in 2018 with a co-op that decided to use these. And then the dissertation didn't have the objective to discuss what were the material conditions required to achieve socialism. This is not the objective. Let's assume that we already have some sort of means of production, how we can best use them, right? So, cool. All right. Just those were the disclaimers. The sections of this presentation is basically where we talk a little bit, very shortly, because I know that many of you already know what the calculation debate is. And then some of it we will talk about how we apply it, right? Cool. So I have no idea why this is not entirely in English. I'm sorry. This was supposed to be translated a couple weeks ago anyway. Anyway, no worries. It's fine, you're not missing anything. I will just put it in English. So the idea is that this economic calculation debate, long story short, was a discussion that happened in the 50s by economics, let's say the economics perspective of if we can determine the price of a product. And most socialist orientations say yes, we can find a way to achieve the price of an object in a society. And there were Austrian economics, mostly capitalist oriented, saying no, we cannot achieve to obtain the price of a product in a society because there's so many decisions into making products that's almost impossible to come up to a price, right? Anyway. Oh, here it is. Anyway, no worries. Maybe some of you are familiar with Paul Cockshott and Alan Cottrell's work. This is kind of related. The difference is that in most of their papers and their books, they have mentioned that we can achieve both mathematical and computational estimations. What I do believe is that we don't need to be that precise. We can live with certain amounts of, let's say, uncertainty, and then still be efficient, right? Anyway, this is how the original, very old proposal of how we need to produce algorithm works. Production takes place, goods are sold, goods are sold at a certain point. We estimate the ratios of labor that those products have been produced and sold, And then basically we just optimize by observing how much of these products were sold, if they were sold at the right price, yes or no, if there was excess amount of products, or if we were living under scarcity, right? So basically, all products are produced and sold or not, right? We don't need to get into it. It's just some sort of the economic debate. So what I was thinking at that time was that maybe we can apply some of these concepts not to a macro level where all the production is applied, but we can start with regional or local co-op level, right? If we can make some enterprises that are not purely capitalistic, like co-ops or different alternative ways of producing, maybe we can identify ways to make it more efficient. And I want to make another note. I don't think that we need to obtain the value of the products in terms of labor. Prices are not essentially wrong. Money currency is not the problem. I think that many authors and other speakers have talked about budgets and some sorts of discussions have been moving towards the inherent evil of money in society, but I don't think it's a problem specifically for this case. We can budget and produce with money and still come up with something that's non-capitalistic in some cases. Right. So this is usually how prices are made according to the Marxian perspective, and how profit is composed in any capitalistic venture where you have cost and then you have a gain on top of it. This is very simple. And then you obtain gain, which is usually positive. If it's negative, then you're not a good capitalist according to this. And what we have observed across time is that sometimes capitalism doesn't make the most optimal decisions. And this is not because they are not making profit, it's because it's cost-oriented and not necessarily let's say, product-oriented. And these tables, you don't need to pay a lot of attention. I'm just going to share that these tables demonstrate by a very simple example, if you have a certain amount of workers, and then you have a different capital composition, maybe the amount of production is not efficient when you have more work. It's just Marx's basic theory of capital composition, and then it's just an example, right? But basically what we're saying is that capitalism would suggest to use a less efficient method when you are comparing to one capital intensive and one non-capital intensive. It has been observed in certain companies when they outsource their labor to cheaper markets, but they're not that technically developed. I think the current administration in the US has made a point several times that they want to bring industries, so they're trying, let's say, to reverse what was going on in the last 50 years, right? So, cool. Cost effective is not necessarily effective. And then we'll skip this. This is how an artificial neural network looks. It's not very important, but for this, how it looks, but what is important is that if we apply this to layers, let's say, of workers and let's say, and the basket of products that we want to produce, neural networks solve the problem of transforming the prices and the labor units, because neural networks don't require one single unit to be used. They can be anything as long as you have a clear matrix and then a number of objects. So here we will define what I was suggesting at that time. Over here I'm going to, we should have a pointer here. Okay, here. Pointer. Here. So if you pay attention on the right, we have what we can call the basket of objects. Let's say for simplification, we have 5 different objects we want to produce, and these are products that can come from milk production services. I'm going to share my experience at the end. So let's say that we have a co-op that makes milk-based products, yogurt, cheese, raw milk, everything related to that product, right? And then we have a number of workers that we want to employ in this company. We have decided that these workers can work in different units across time, and they can switch between managerial positions and labor-oriented positions and all that, right? And then we know that we have many different, these are the workers, and then we know that we have many inputs coming from different products that we need to use to produce. So it could be milk, it could be gas that we need to use to boil the milk, or anything that's required for production, right? And K is what in neural networks is mentioned as the number of hidden layers, and it's basically how the neural network solves the relationship between what's the input and what's the output, right? Anyway, the idea is that eventually you come up with a solution that gets closer and closer to the optimal function. I'm not going to get into the details of this math. The idea is that if you have an objective, let's say you want to produce, I don't know, 500 different types of cheese, and then you want to come up with a solution that can help you to produce those 500 cheese, right? Make sense? Good. Anyway, cool. So that's just section 2. I'm going to share what I think is more important here is that I apply this concept towards co-op that we're making these products, and they're having 35 different products embedded in the process, right? So between inputs, between labor and the office space that we're using, 35 different products were required to make a single piece of yogurt or cheese. And what we found out in that applied research is that it changed around 4,000 different workers, right? So these 35 products, there were companies hiring other people, other co-ops, and involves nearly 1,000 people. And then we have 5 different consumption baskets, which basically they were 5 different amounts of products that we wanted to produce in order for the company to, or the co-op to make enough money to survive, at least. So what we did is we trained the model, putting all these inputs, putting all the products, putting all the 5 different baskets, and what we found out is that we could, this is called a confusion matrix, and basically means we have 5 different classes or 5 different baskets of products. We were able to predict very precisely up to, I think here it says 90%, but I think the other slide says that for some baskets we were able to chain or understand better how many inputs we require up to the 99% of precision. And in the worst case, we were able to obtain 96 precision, right? So what we did is we applied the system for a couple months, and we found out that we saved closely to 36% of the cost of the products. So basically, the co-op was making a higher profit by implementing this forecasting method, right? And therefore, they were not only able to plan, but also to involve the workers into which baskets they wanted to produce. So some of them have preferences. Some of them say that the business should be selling more yogurt. Some of them say that the business should sell more cheese. You know, like those discussions happen everywhere. And after we decided that a basket of products that were more yogurt-oriented, that was the solution at the time, would bring more profit, everyone was aligned. So this part of the democratic planning was happening under the assumption that this was like a feed cycle where everyone was participating, and by knowing that they were making more profit, this worked like a reward system. I remember someone yesterday was discussing about rewards in socialism. I have observed this with a co-op to be very measurable. They were very happy to see that the baskets of products they were selling was selling for more profit, not necessarily in terms of money, because everyone was getting a small share of the product, of the labor, but in terms of being right. For them, knowing that the products that they were selling for a better price and waste was less, was some sort of a reward. And anyway, this is how the coefficients of this production matrix work. So basically every single of these 35 products they were using were either more capital intensive or less capital intensive, and then for these 35 industries were able to be planned. Those who were more capital intensive, let's say labor, paying wages, and their share of the co-op were more capital intensive, so we allocated more money towards those. And for those that were less capital intensive, we put less budget, right? And that's it. It's just an example of how we could do things. I saw it at a micro level, but I would like to see it applied towards further co-ops or alternative products. Thank you very much.